Welcome to the D-Shift podcast, where we provide inspiration, motivation, and education to help you transition from the challenges of divorce to discover the freedom and ability to live life on your own terms. Are you ready? Let's get this shift started. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the D-Shift podcast. And this one is something that's really special and near and dear to my heart. We are going to talk about how parents can help children who might have different abilities or different needs to navigate the divorce process. So I have an expert in the field here to help me out today. I'm the amazing Mary Ann Hughes. She is a certified, I got to get my card, so I got to make sure I read this right. She is a certified special needs divorce coach, a transition and recovery coach, a certified divorce specialist like I am, a mediator like me, and a parenting coordinator like me. You're a parenting coordinator as well, Mary Ann. She's also co-director of the National Association of Divorce Professionals Special Needs Chapter. So, Mary Ann, welcome and thank you for bringing your expertise.
Thank you, Marty, for having me. So excited to be here today.
And it was really nice because Mary Ann and I had talked on LinkedIn, and then I had seen her at the National Association of Divorce Professionals meetings. And then lo and behold, we're both in Texas, and we ended up at the Texas Association of Mediators conference together. So we actually got to meet in person. That's always so nice now that we can get back to meeting in person again.
Sure is, yes.
So Mary Ann, you have this wealth of expertise. Can you tell a little bit about what got you into this specific area of helping parents navigate divorce with special needs children?
Sure, yes. So my reason for being a certified special needs divorce coach is that I'm a mom of 2 children on autism spectrum. And several years ago, I was going through divorce and I couldn't find resources to help. I didn't know what to do, how to navigate it, how to get through the overwhelm, and resources to connect with so that I could learn what to do to advocate for my kids in the process. And so long story short, I ended up getting a great result for my family, but it took a lot of time, effort, and money to get there. And I thought to myself, this is kind of crazy that this is such a common problem with about 80% of families with a child with a disability going through divorce. Why should it be so hard?
Yeah.
And so I decided to take all my knowledge and then built upon that, got certifications to be able to help other people. So I started Special Family Transitions, decided to become a divorce coach, which I had never done before, even thought about. And that's where the road has led. So now, as you mentioned, I'm one of the very few, actually started a program recently for a special needs certification within the Certified Divorce Coach program. And so I'm honored to help inspire that and build that. Actually, I'm a teacher with that as well. And so trying to get more people, aware that this service exists, the specialty exists, and that there is help for families who are going through this. And so you mentioned the other certifications. So I want to find additional ways to support families as well. And so recently I've become a mediator and a parent coordinator to try to find additional ways to support, where maybe coaching may or may not be the right answer for them, but other ways that they can get the information and help they need.
Right. And thank you for that. And we talked about this at the conference, but my background is I was a behavior consultant for school districts up in Canada, in Alberta. And I also did a lot of work in both Vancouver, Surrey School District, as well as in Alberta, with setting up behavioral programs and helping kids who were dealing with challenges of behavioral disorders and learning disabilities, because those quite often exist concurrently, as kids struggle with trying to get through the school system. And I do, first of all, really appreciate the fact that, and I'm going to throw this out here, I know a lot of people get upset when I say this, but that you went through the process of, even though you've gone through the experience and you had all this great insight and personal experience, but that you then went and got specific training on how to deal with this, because there's really a lot of options for parents going through divorce with any kind of kids, whether your children have special needs or not. A lot of these plans and slightly different ways of looking at divorce can be really beneficial for all children. So that's a really long answer, and I'm sorry I kind of went off on a tangent. Tell me a little bit, Mary Ann, what is it that you see are some of the key maybe issues facing families with special needs kids going through a divorce that maybe other families aren't having to focus on as much?
Sure. So you made a lot of good points. And so when you have a child with a disability, depending on what it is, mine is autism. So depending on, what you're dealing with as complex medical issues or other kind of neurodiversity or whatever it might be, it's important to know that there's ways to help you and your children through the process. And so what I mean by that is, one, you want to be a strong advocate for your kids. That's my biggest um, focus and awareness I like to bring, and people kind of recognize me as doing that. So I do things in a positive way. I'm not trying to have people fight over things or create conflict, but I'm trying to put the child first. What does a child need to be successful? And so a child with special needs or disability, whatever we want to call it, they're going to have perhaps ongoing issues. These needs and concerns are not going to go away when the child turns 18. And I think that's what makes it most different from a regular type of divorce where maybe child support will end, because then the child most likely will be independent in some
Right.
fashion. Well, but when you have a child with a disability or adult child going, through this, my kids were um, nearing 18 or around 18 when I went through my process. We don't know what the future holds. And so where I am in Texas, and every state is different, every country is different how it's handled, but child support can continue beyond 18. And no matter what the laws are. So I'm not a lawyer, so I don't give legal advice and try to quote that. But you want to put the child first. So even if it's not in your state or where you reside, that's an option for you. You can still negotiate with the other parent, hopefully, in terms of putting the child's needs first. How can we best meet the needs of the child now and in the future? And
Right.
that's what made my divorce complicated or taking longer than maybe some people would have liked, is that I want to make sure that I did address those issues. I didn't know what the options were. I didn't know what the programs were. I didn't know what the costs would be. So I had to research all that. And that became an important part of my advocacy and my doing my duty as the mom, as their caregiver for my kids. That was my situation. I know everybody's is different, but I was the one that was handling all those school issues and planning and advocating in school as well. And so I didn't want to just have the divorce and then not know what was going to happen. The day divorce was signed, what was going to happen to my kids in the future. So that became the impetus and the focus of my divorce. And so yeah, because there's also so yeah, there's also transition issues that you want to deal with, right? Because kids with autism or other type of concerns may have a harder time transitioning and understanding what's happening to their family. And so I tried to figure out, how can I best support my kids through this process? And I tried to find mental health professionals to help. And honestly, it was hard to find, and a lot of them weren't able to offer to want to help, because one of my children is not very verbal, maybe had behavior issues, getting better now, but at the time it became a real issue in terms of how the divorce was affecting him and how I was going to support him through it. And so finally came to the realization with someone kind of guiding me, saying, what do you do when you have a situation for your kids, when there is a change in transition? Like, well, I create social stories for them. And so maybe you had experience of that, in your past experience, but basically you're putting together a story in an easy to understand format at their level as to what's happening and what change they can expect and how to help them through the next steps. So I created something called What's Happening to My Family, and I did it a very positive way. I put pictures, just kind of explain what was happening, got pictures of where they were going to be staying, because they had never been away from mom for a night. We've been on vacation, but it was always together. And
Right.
so that was this kind of scary thing, is how do we prepare a child who's not understanding what's happening to be at another parent or another location, without mom. And so it became a good tool, and I actually have it on my YouTube channel, so we can refer to that later. So for people to know how to do that, right? How do you prepare a child? And there's also other ways we can prepare. We can have consistent schedules. We can create a calendar, minimize the number of transitions back and forth between homes. And so maybe I'm getting a little bit off topic, but the point is, you want to kind of see, what does your child need? And the answer may not be a cookie cutter approach that works in other divorces, right? In terms of
Right.
standard possession or uh, extended periods of time away from one parent, because
Right.
there's medical things you want to consider, there's behavior, there's schooling, there's programs, therapies that you want to be sure are incorporated with both parents hopefully being apart.
Yeah, and I think that last part is really the key. If both parents are willing to cooperate in the best interests of the kids, I mean, nesting is a term that a lot of people will throw that one out there. And for those parents that are listening in that don't know what nesting is, that is where the kids stay in the family home and mom and dad come in and out on their parenting time with their kids. Now that works if both parents trust each other, if both parents are okay with that. And so typically what happens is when it's mom's time with the kids, she's in the home with the kids. When it's dad's time or the other parent's time with the kids, that other parent comes into the house, and then mom goes to dad or the other parent's house, or they have some arrangement so that there's not an extra cost to the parent who's being kind of deposed out of their home for a while. So there's those things, but I really like what you said about not just worrying about location, but there's also therapy, there's school, there's how the kids are reacting. Because the best plans that mom and dad come up with don't mean anything if it doesn't work for the child.
Right. Everyone's gonna be different, so you got to know your child, and you also want to consider the other children you may have. Right. You may have a neurotypical child, and so you want to consider their needs as well. Whether the same schedule is going to work. Make sure that that child gets enough attention as well. We don't want them falling through the cracks, and they have a hard
Right.
time enough sometimes adjusting to all the focus perhaps being on the child with more needs. We want to make sure that all the kids are looked at and addressed.
Yeah, and I want to throw in here that not a lot of, and this is nothing against attorneys, but most attorneys have a little bit of training in child development levels when it comes to divorce, most family attorneys, but they don't necessarily have any training as to how children with different abilities or kids on the autism spectrum or nonverbal children or children with behavioral disorders are going to respond to a divorce. And so they are well meaning in their intent, and they will tell you what the law says a parenting plan would be, would construe an effective parenting plan, but that doesn't mean it's going to work for your kids at all.
Right, right. That's a great point. A lot of lawyers don't have the experience, a lot of judges don't have the experience, a lot of professionals don't. And so it's important to find those that have been through that process, understand, and can guide you. And so one piece of advice I would give to families who are working maybe with um, a team of people who maybe haven't had that much experience and don't understand your day-to-day life and the child's day-to-day challenges is create something called a day in the life. So kind of we can do it, visually, you can do it in writing, you can do it video, whatever works for you, kind of to share, what is it like from beginning of the day to the end of the day, the things that it takes, the time that it takes, how much of your time is maybe spent dealing with behaviors, how much time is spent transporting them to different therapies, so they can understand that when we say we're giving her all 100% of the time, or x many hours of the day is spent on caregiving, it really is not just an exaggeration to the other side to say, well, you just want that to get more child support or
Right.
whatever. And yeah.
Or to avoid going back to work. I've heard that one. Well, you could be going back to work. Well, no, if your child is only going to school for a limited length of time during the day, or your child only does half days or something, there's all of these factors that come in. And another one, even if you're not talking about a child that has those kind of, behavioral issues, you may be looking at a child that needs specific medical treatments. Even something as simple as, this was a big one back in the day when I was working a lot in school systems, where one parent agreed that the child needed to be on a specific medication. At that time, it was whether parents should be using ADHD, particularly Ritalin or Adderall or whatever, for treating ADHD in children. One parent agreed, one parent didn't. So when the child was at the parent that didn't, that parent just didn't give the child the medication. That was worse, because then the kid is sometimes medicated, sometimes not. It's not good for the child. And the kids just spiral out of, they're not getting their needs met at that point in time. So how do you work? Do you ever find that you're working with a parent that in a divorce where one parent is not as aware of the needs that their child has than the other parent, and that's complicating the divorce proceedings? Do you sometimes work with people like that?
Or it could be that, or it could be the flip side, where one parent is the primary caregiver and has made all the has all the information, made all the decisions, and knows what medicines and things to do to address different issues that come up. But what we want to have happen is for that parent to share that information, right? There's different ways to do that because we want both parents to be able to take care of that child when they're in their care, right? We want to, maybe the parent doesn't know the reason for the medicine. They don't know how to give it. They don't know all the things to do to deal with behaviors that come up or different issues, to understand the therapies and how to get involved. And so we want to be able to share that information because, what good is it if one person keeps that information, the other parent then is struggling, and then it negatively impacts that child and then makes it harder for that child to return home. And then you have all kinds of other behaviors too. So we want things to be as consistent as possible from household to household. Granted, people are going to parent differently and we can't tell people how to be a good parent, but we can provide neutral type tone information that you put together kind of as a reference so the other parent can say, okay, even though they say, no, I don't want your information. I've had a lot of cases where the other party may say that or express that kind of sentiment, but in reality, they are referring to that. They are using that information. There's one lovely client I worked with who even shared Amazon links for what she would order for her child to take care of her needs. Well, that other parent did exactly that and clicked on all those things so he would have what he needed at his house without seeming like he was asking the other person for information. People don't like to do that or seem like they don't have the information, but that way it was done in a way where it's for the benefit of the child. This is what our child needs, and this is how to address those needs.
That's the key thing, right? For the benefit of the child. And so whether you've got children that have different like physical needs or medication needs or whatever, I always recommend to parents, make sure that those supplies are at both homes, like those essential things like medications or maybe mobility aids or whatever, whenever possible. And I realize sometimes it's not possible because of cost and things, but whenever possible, those things should be at both houses. Because if not, what happens is, somebody forgets something and the kids get over to the other parent's house and now they don't have what they need. And then it becomes well, why didn't you send it? And that kind of spirals out. So if you can have those things in both households, that's really helpful. Again, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't cost wise to do that.
Sure.
And one of the things that I attended a training through your committee of the special needs part of the National Association of Divorce Professionals, and I was not aware of all the possible funding programs and options that parents can actually create funding opportunities and apply for these funds to help their kids when they are going to be 18 and over and moving out of the house or maybe moving into a group home or some kind of supported living arrangement. There are funds out there.
Well, there are some, and depending on where you are and how old your child is and when you get on these waiting lists, it may take quite a long time to get some of those services and supports. As in Texas, for instance, we have like 15-year plus waiting lists for some of those type of funding programs, but there's also different ones to look into. I know we're international, I don't want to be state specific, but there's different opportunities. Each state and different places have these disability organizations that can share information to what's specific in your geography. So definitely, there's so much out there every day. I learn something new. I go to special needs resource fair. I connect with people online, do these webinars. And there's always something out there. So there's public funding for sure, depending on what age and even for college age and to help you kind of train you for possible vocations and things like that. But part of what becomes sticky in these divorces is, like you said, how do we address financially the needs of the child, what they're going to need? I kind of referred to earlier about what's going to happen in the future and how much these things cost. But where's that money going to come from, right?
Right.
So
yeah.
What are your options? You got child support, possibly spousal support, even though some places that's harder to get. There's life insurance. There's, you got to set up trust, perhaps a third-party trust, first-party trust for child support if the child's over 18. Because what you don't want to do is sometimes, depending on where you reside, if you in the U.S., if you have over a certain amount in the child's name, then you become disqualified for benefits that you may have now or in the future. And so we want to be real careful with that. So that's why you want to work with people who are familiar with these topics in divorce legally. And so that you have the language as such where that child will not be penalized inadvertently then lose funds, and then it becomes an issue for sure.
Yeah, and that was so interesting, and I don't want to get too specific, but it was so interesting because I'm aware of these funds, that trusts and things that can be set up for these for children to help them like throughout life. But I wasn't aware that, let's say, a grandmother or grandfather passes away and leaves a lump sum, sometimes not even a very big lump sum, like just a few $1,000s to the child, with special needs, and because they now have that asset, it kicks them out of qualifications for lifetime access to funding. So it's important to talk to somebody that knows what they're doing, and then also to be able to communicate to the family, hey, I appreciate you want to leave my child something, but this is going to really mess them up financially if you do this. So I thought that was fascinating. And so, Mary Ann, you have shared like a ton of information, and I think we could go on and on, because I'm with you. I don't think there's enough resources available for parents. Now, do you, before we kind of get wrapping up here, do you work with, I know you're in Texas, do you work with people all over, families all over, or are you just limited to Texas?
Yeah, for sure. Since I'm not a lawyer, I don't give legal advice. I can work with people anywhere. I have clients throughout the US. I've connected with people in Canada and in Europe. So definitely happy to help and just kind of support you through the process, maybe help you investigate what is available, in your geography, but also more so just to be there for support, everything a divorce coach does. And specifically within, the special needs aspects, to have you think about, what does the future look like? How can I manage now to support my child's needs and get the other parent to co-parent effectively? And how do I then plan for the future so that we're thinking about these things, planning for these things as part of the divorce and afterwards? And so a big value I bring too is to have people think about these things even perhaps before they get a lawyer, before they start going down the road and working with somebody who maybe doesn't understand. So that way they have some goals in mind, some things that they can think about and be ready to discuss, and have a good mindset in divorce. As you know, as a divorce coach, is so important.
Yeah, and even things like your will, how you set up your will, has to be done carefully. If you have a child with different abilities, or is going to have special needs for their life, that they may not never be completely independent, you have to structure that again so that you don't kick them out of any potential services that they're going to have, through an inheritance of a house that they're never going to be able to live in or possess, because they need the additional support. So there's a lot of things to think about.
Right, right. So those people, so you're going to need a family law attorney. You're going to need an estate planning attorney that would do those kind of things, the wills and the trusts. And then there's special needs financial planners that can get involved to help you kind of forecast for the future and come up with numbers that you can present in
Yeah.
your situation. And then, so all kinds of professionals, sometimes mental health professionals, to kind of talk about the diagnosis and the impact, so that, like you said, the team can better understand what we're dealing with and what the challenges are now and in the future.
Yeah, and I just want to highlight that one professional that I don't think we've talked about on the show before. That's a sort of what did you say? A special needs financial advisor.
Right, and they have a special designation. I mean, there's all kinds out there, but there's one called a charter special needs consultant, and they've gone through special training to understand special needs planning and the benefits, and what how to plan and do the life care planning.
Yeah, and this is never a happy thought, but they can also help you plan your estate. In the event that you were to pass away, if you are the primary caregiver for that child, even after they're 18, you need to have, they can help you get the plan in place that's going to support your child, as long as your estate, based on what your estate is. So thank you for bringing that up. I had completely forgot about that professional. So, Mary Ann, with all this information, what do you think is the kind of key factor that parents who are divorcing or considering divorce with kids that are going to have special needs or in the future, what do you think they need to focus on?
Like I said, putting the child first, but also focusing on themselves. I know as a special needs parent, we tend to put our kids first and their needs first, and we forget about ourselves. We don't take care of ourselves. We may not be in physically or mentally or good space to really make good decisions. So we want to take care of ourselves, give ourselves some grace, time to process, go through the grieving cycle, as we need to, because you're grieving not just loss of your marriage and the whole divorce process. But sometimes people are still grieving the diagnosis their child has. So that becomes a common issue in these divorces, which I didn't mention, is that one parent may still be in denial about the child's ability or disability. And so that becomes a complicating factor when you're trying to make agreements and plan.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Mary Ann, if people want to reach out and find out more about what you do or get hold of you and speak to you about special needs divorce coaching, what is the best way to reach you?
The best way to reach me is my website is specialfamilytransitions.com. And there's a link there to send me a note. There's a contact form. It also has links to all my social media, and they're all called Special Family Transitions. So as I mentioned, I've got the YouTube channel with resources and podcasts and webinars I've done that share even more information about these specific areas. And so, yeah, I'm here to share information as much as I can. If people want to work one-on-one with me, they're welcome to. I'll eventually do some group activities too. I have a small little course I put together to kind of compile these tips how to have a successful divorce it's kind of targeted more towards moms, but it could be for anybody when you're dealing with divorce with a spouse, child with a disability or special needs, because you don't want to forget and to do some things or to work with your attorney to make sure that they're covering all these different areas.
Yeah, and you may have to be the person that lets your attorney know there are some of these areas that you have to focus in on. So, Mary Ann, thank you so much. This has been amazing. I really appreciate you sharing all your wisdom.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to share awareness about this area.
And thank you all for listening in to another episode of The D Shift. And don't forget to tune in again next Tuesday. Thanks for listening and supporting the D Shift podcast. If you would like to attend live trainings by our amazing guests and have a chance to ask questions and get answers from our experts, join the D Shift crew. For more details and to sign up, head on over to www.divorcecoachforwomen and click on the podcast page.